Hello guys, I'm Andrea Miceli and this is ACES. Today I am with Amy Webb. She's the founder and CEO at Future Today Institute and also an assistant professor at the New York University Stern School of Business. Amy, it's a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amy, when we analyze the AI landscape, we have Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, IBM, and Apple. These nine companies have the control of almost everything in the market. And as you said in your book, The Big Nine, they are the G Mafia. Tell me what it is, the G Mafia, and what are the risks for us to have artificial intelligence under the control of these companies?
So I'm a quantitative futurist, and my job is to research emerging signals and trends using data and to try to model their next order impacts. And we do that for ourselves at the Future Day Institute. We also do that for our clients. And I would say starting about maybe 12 or 13 years ago, artificial intelligence kept coming up. It's kind of didn't matter what we were researching, what client we were working with. Over and over again, AI kept sort of being a part of what we were discussing. And throughout, all of these years, we seem to keep coming back to the same companies and the same schools over and over and over again. 6 of those companies are based in the United States. That's the G Mafia. So that's Google, Apple, Microsoft, IBM, who am I forgetting? Amazon and Facebook. And in China, they're collectively known as the BAT. So that's Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. And what we observed doing all of just the research that I was already doing, I just observed that, it's these companies that have the most funding. They seem to get the most excitement and interest among the development community. They have the best partnerships with the best research institutions in the world that are working on artificial intelligence. It's kind of a closed community. And so that in and of itself was interesting, right? Because AI is on a very long trajectory of development. I mean, it'll be 7 decades as AI continues to be built, but there's already a lot of consolidation. And I think it's interesting that so much of our future is in the hands of so few people and organizations. And as I was thinking through that, because of what I do for a living, I'm thinking, well, what are the next order impacts? So got a small group of people, basically sort of geographically centered in 2 countries. They've basically gone to the same schools. There's not a lot of diversity. So what could happen as a result as time wears on? And we have 2 different government structures and 2 different types of economies. In China, you have a single party political system with an incredibly smart person in charge, that's Xi Jinping, who is now effectively the leader of China for the rest of his life. And the Chinese Communist Party, separate from AI, has been innovating in the area of policy. So they've been doing really smart things in developing partnerships and relationships with other governments all around the world. And artificial intelligence is a big piece of this. In the United States, technically we have a 2-party system. Things are a little crazy over here right now and have been for a while. But in this free market economy, we don't have a lot of regulation. We tend to build first and think about regulating after the fact. And our technology companies are incredibly powerful. They are so powerful that a lot of them are setting up their own corporate foreign policy groups, in a way competing with the State Department. So I was thinking through all of this, and it occurred to me that, we have a lot of opportunity on the horizon, but we're also looking at a lot of risk. And I think that risk is addressable. But what I'm observing, and I'm sure you are too, is that not a lot of people really understand artificial intelligence, especially people in the business community who are having to make decisions or people who work in policy who are having to make decisions. So I wanted to write a book that would be for everybody, to help them think through where we're headed.
And what do you think are the main misunderstandings people have about AI, and why is it important to put everybody at the same page?
That's a great question. I'd kind of be curious, because I know you're interested in this space too. I'm kind of curious to see what you think. I think one of the most common misunderstandings is that AI is a robot. Robots are just containers for code, but they themselves are not artificial intelligence. So I think that's one important distinction, because I think a lot of people, myself included, when we think about the future, we tend to think about the movies and the television shows that we've seen and the books that we've read. And so when people think about the future of AI, they tend to think about robots that will come and, like the Terminator, like murder us in our sleep. I think another important misconception, especially within the business community, is that artificial intelligence is new, that it's something that kind of just happened over the past couple of decades, or that it was something that maybe happened in the 90s or the 80s. Artificial intelligence is kind of a meaningless term. It's not a trend. It just describes the next era of computing. The term artificial intelligence was first used in 1956 by some professors that met up at Dartmouth University in the United States for a summer to think through what could a future of machines that think really be like. But even before then, there were scientists in the 40s and in the 30s and in the late 1800s who were really thinking about the future of artificially intelligent machines. So I think this is really important, because we have this hype cycle. Sometimes when you repeatedly hear a term over and over again, or you hear about funding, your assumption, we start to feel this sense of urgency, I think a false sense of urgency. And the frequency of hearing like the frequency of the term being used doesn't necessarily correlate to the amount of progress made. And so I think it's really, really important, because I think everybody is looking for artificial and general intelligence, like to happen in a couple of years, or that it will be something like HAL from 2001, the movie, or Her from Samantha. We're on a evolutionary path, and we've already started to see very basic AGI. So this is strong artificial intelligence. And quite frankly, we've been using artificial narrow intelligence every single day for decades. All of us have. So.
When it comes to AI, risk is always on the agenda. There is a lot of discussion about it, and very influential people have very different opinions. For example, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Are you with Mark, Elon, or do you have a third opinion?
Oh my God, I hope I'm not with Mark or with Elon. Those guys are crazy. It's not good crazy either. So what would I say? I'm a pragmatist. So the technology itself, any technology, has dual use capability, which is a way of saying it can be used for its intended purpose, and hopefully, a sort of good way, or it can be used in other ways that, we really never imagined. Artificial superintelligence is the sort of buzzword that everybody thinks about. And if you're not familiar, when people talk about AI, they tend to talk in three different levels. So there's what's called weak or artificial narrow intelligence. That's like the anti-lock brake system in your car. When you make a phone call on your mobile device, when your phone connects to the tower, which connects, to a system that all of that stuff is sort of small, narrow tasks that a machine can do better automatically, or can do just as efficiently as we humans can. And that's everywhere. Artificial general intelligence depends on who you ask. So what we're really talking about is a system that can do many different things without a human in the loop, that are decision driven. And artificial superintelligence is theorized as an AI system capable of very quickly very quickly making decisions autonomously in an incredibly powerful way. Now, here's the issue. There's no governing body anywhere in the world that says officially, this is what artificial narrow intelligence is, and this is the criteria for AGI. That doesn't exist. And so, and the other thing is everybody's kind of fixated on exactly what year we will have AGI and ASI. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter. And the reason that it doesn't matter is because there's no single switch. It's not like Elon Musk shows up somewhere and like flips the switch on and suddenly we've got, nanobots running around the world or inside of our bodies making decisions for us and it wipes us all out or something. It's an evolution. And I think that there are plenty of risks, but the risks that we face are today, right? We have real world, to get fixated on the more the sci-fi part of the story 50 years in the future is a distraction from the somewhat boring but super important work that has to be done now. A lot of the databases that these systems use to train have bad data, and everybody knows it. And if you put bad data into an algorithm, you're going to get bad data out on the other end. The problem is there's no financial incentive to fix what's broken. It would be a cost center, not an opportunity to earn revenue. So nobody's doing it. And that's a addressable problem today. We've got two different government systems that are essentially, we've got people kind of making decisions about what the future of autonomy should look like. And there's not a lot of collaboration between big government systems, and they're very different ideas. That's an addressable problem that we ought to deal with today. What Zuckerberg and Elon Musk tend to talk about publicly, with either this unbelievable utopia that AI will usher in, or absolute dystopia that is waiting for us, and we should go to Mars. These are distractions. They're convenient, exciting to think about distractions. The part that nobody wants to talk about is the shit work that we have to do right now to clean up what's broken.
And there is another great debate regarding AI. There is the relationship between the evolution of the technology and jobs in general. What are the differences between the impact that countries like US and China will have in comparison to developing countries like Brazil?
In developed countries that rely more on the service sector for a lot of their GDP, so that's definitely the United States. Robotic process automation was starting to prove to be a good cost savings in companies and offer efficiencies. So again, what repetitive tasks, cognitive tasks, are people doing that perhaps a machine might be able to do better? So that was kind of already in the works. Oddly enough, the coronavirus has accelerated some of that because there were lots of companies that had delayed their digital transformation within their organizations. Suddenly, everybody has to work from home. And even cities that had started to reopen in the United States are closing again, all over the place. So it's pretty clear that there will be intermittent openings and closings. But if you're a business, it's hard to move at this point, does it make sense to bring your workforce back or to try to automate more and, maybe do more of the work just with fewer people? So we're actually seeing an uptick in some workforce automation, which will absolutely have an impact on the workforce and on jobs. in addition to automation that we were already seeing in warehouses. Now, in developing countries, and especially in Brazil, where you've got a pretty big mining community, there are big tech companies that have been trying to help with workforce automation there. Amazon, the tech company, has crossed over and is doing some work in the mining space for data analytics and things like that. So I think we will, in some ways, some of the physical robots, it will take a little bit longer to get them working collaboratively. So the cognitive workforce will probably see some impact faster. Now, the good news is that there are a lot of manual jobs that robots are not going to be able to do for a long time, like fix a toilet, or fix, the plumbing in your bathroom. Everybody, basically everywhere, has different stuff in their homes. And we already don't have enough people who can, at least in the United States, who can fix things. I don't know what the situation is in Brazil, but it's going to be a while before robots can do that type of fixing. And if anything, it's more likely that the products that we put into our homes will just be built so that they can be serviced in a different way. So anyhow, with that being said, I wonder if advancements in AI actually unlocks new parts of the economy in developing economies around the world. When I look at Brazil and the strengths of Brazil, you have incredible knowledge in natural resources, in ways that other people just don't understand. My assumption would be that at some point you might, you will also mine data, right? That has to do with those natural resources and become a source for analytics and understanding, what's next. And maybe that starts to fold into areas like synthetic biology and helping to generate the next generation of engineered biomaterials and things like that.
When we talk about China, privacy always comes up in the discussion. You also wrote a book called Data, a Love Story, where you discuss, among other things, the impact of the amount of data in our society. Initiatives like Solid, the web decentralization project led by Tim Berners-Lee at MIT, and the use of blockchain are trying to let tech companies to access information and provide the best of personalization, experience, and privacy. Do you think this is just a trend, or will it be possible to have a great experience and privacy at the same time?
It's a great question. So first of all, the project that Tim Berners-Lee has been working on is super interesting. There have been a few sort of newer distributed models over the past couple of years. There was something called Project Maelstrom, which was meant to be and it was part of a project from the people who started Tor, I think. Anyhow, the problem is that there have to be business use cases if you want a faster adoption. So you'll have distributed computing that is protected among small communities of people. Here's a good example. There's an app that not a lot of people know of called Keybase, which is encrypted and kind of clunky and hard to use. And I think was just acquired by, I forget. You're always going to have pockets of pockets and communities of people, but until you have a strong business case, you don't see that faster adoption. And so one of the challenges that has existed with blockchain and all of these efforts is there just hasn't been a meaningful business case. And without the meaningful business case, you don't see the investment, things like that. The internet grew out of ARPANET. It was used in academia for a long time before email, So part of what we're going to need are so it's not the fear of privacy that's going to drive progress. It's the promise of profits and revenue. So if we want, I mean, this is kind of a strange way to think about this, but if we want to solve the data privacy problem, I think we're going to get a faster solution coming up with new ways for people and companies to earn money than we are with regulation. And that might be a really depressing way to think about the future, but but the problem is you can't unplug from the system.
Yeah.
I mean, the modern economy is literally powered by Amazon Web Services, among other things, right? So you can't unplug. And the other problem is these systems they're very complex. So you can't impose like a personal data ownership system or force. It would be very hard right now to come up with a system where I would have to sort of I own my data. That's a big thing, hot buzzword. Owning your data, right? As though that is even possible, which it's not. So we have some problems to solve, but I don't think we're going to get there through punitive measures or through regulation. If we can figure out a way to help economies grow and like incentivize versus punish, then I think we get to a faster place.
My last question, Emi. We have a great shortage of professionals in the STEM areas in Brazil. How can we be competitive as a nation, and how can our companies stay relevant given this reality?
I can talk from an individual level first, because I think that's probably the easiest. I can, again, when I am out in the world, or I'm at South by Southwest, or I'm at MIT Tech, or whatever, I run into more Brazilians than people from any other country. But here's why that's important. And there's everybody that I've ever met from Brazil is like super open and really interested to have a conversation. That's important because that helps, I think, the entrepreneurial community have a reputation of, hey, these are people I want to know more. I want to collaborate. Like, I want to do something interesting, right? So the more people that do that, the better, because we see we see the opposite in a lot of places. And especially here in the US, Silicon Valley can be a pretty closed community. So that's one thing. What I'm trying to say is relationships matter a lot. So look for opportunities to collaborate whenever possible. That's also, I think, a really good thing. Culturally speaking, within organizations, organizations tend to be siloed. Even tiny startups, they tend to be very siloed. And you've got big, like a lot of, I think, companies in Brazil have these very top-heavy management structures where you have 50 executives that are in charge of different things. And then, the problem is, if you're not forcing people to talk to each other, you wind up with just very heavy bureaucracies. And heavy bureaucracies tend to do a really bad job of preparing for the future. So you can still have 50 people in charge of whatever, but just make sure, as you're building your company or your startup community, you got to collaborate. You have to have cross-functional teams. You have to collaborate. And most importantly, you have to make decisions faster, which I know is not always the case. And again, especially because, in fields like artificial intelligence, it's a pretty siloed community of people. It's not super open, which is a mistake. So the more collaborative and open, I think, the better. And that can be, I think that can be a big strength in Brazil among startups.
I was with Emi Webb, founder and CEO of the Future Today Institute, and this was ACES. Stay with us for more at MIT Technology Review Brazil. Bye.